Hello and welcome. My name is Maria Ryan and welcome to our case study around direct observation. Today I'm going to be talking with Christy Murphy, a lean consultant who was involved in supporting CISC on a project in Cork using direct observation to look for opportunities for improvement on the job. So Christy, welcome to speak here today. I suppose just to kick us off, I think what might be interesting is actually maybe to talk to what exactly is direct observation.
Sure. So direct observation is really a simple tool that where you go to where the work is being done to observe how the work is being done, what's being done, and then categorize the activities in terms of being productive, non-productive, or support activities. So it's really a tool to understand your process better. So what I mean by that, so a lot of the time when we think about our processes, we think of something very simple, step by step, linear kind of relationship from one step to the next. It's very simple, very straightforward. At the same time, a lot of the time, our customer will have a completely different view of how much of that process is actually value add and how much they're actually willing to pay for. That tends to be a lot simpler, a lot smaller. But when you actually go to where the work is done and you observe what's happening, a lot of the time we see something a lot more complicated and involved. And this happens right across the board in almost any process that we've ever done a detailed process mapping exercise on.
And Christy, in terms of looking at this process, what exactly are you actually looking for?
Yeah, well, really what you're doing is you're taking the total process, breaking it down into sub-activities and categorizing the activities as value added, which is where something is changing or we're transforming information or form or function. It's non-value added, which is categorized as by the eight sources of waste under traditional lean. So it's non-productive work like transportation of materials, inventory, motion, waiting, overproduction, overprocessing, defects, underutilization of skills. And the last one would be what we're calling support activity, which is stuff that you absolutely have to do because maybe it's the current, is limited by current technology, and maybe we need to invent some new way of doing things so that that can be minimized or reduced. But those are the main categories that you're looking at. At the same time, then, what you're trying to do is look to eliminate the wastes and minimize the amount of support activity that you do. So you have a much higher proportion of the total process that's value adding.
Very good. And I suppose in terms of the formwork, scope of work here for CISC, what were you looking for? What would you have actually observed as part of that process?
Well, when we observed the process, we were really looking at a number of different stages within the formwork process. If we take the example of the concrete pour, we had a truck arriving connected to a pump. The pump would pump the concrete, and the concrete then was pushed around to make sure that it I suppose, filled the cavity. Then there was screed, float, and leveling. After that, then a mad flurry of work. We had a long period of waiting for the next truck to deliver the next load of concrete. This was all happening with what was considered to be quite a large crew of 5 guys, along with a pump operator. And the wait for the truck would be a very good example of non-productive time, and the 5 guys standing around idle waiting for the next truck.
Very good. And after actually observing the process, then I suppose what would be the next step around direct observation?
Well, in this instance, because there was a lot of waiting, we were looking at I suppose a basic operator load chart, and based on the 5 operators and what they were doing, understanding how much time they were active during the process compared to the rate at which the concrete was being delivered. When you then look at that, you say, okay, with that amount of idle time, maybe there's opportunity to take the workload of 2 of the guys and transfer it to across 3 of the other guys. And the idea being that we reduce the crew size from 5 to 3, and therefore reduce some of the non-value added time or the waiting around time, and transfer the other two guys elsewhere on the site to add value. Ultimately, this is a very challenging view because the general mentality or the typical mentality around concrete work is to get it finished as quickly as possible. Whereas what I'm asking the guys to do is think differently and say, well, look, how are we using the labor around this, and can we adapt based on the rate that the trucks are going to arrive?
Very good, very interesting. It's definitely a different way on how we would actually look at, for example, the example of concrete pour. And can I ask as well, so this was an example in terms of pouring the concrete. What else did you find through this direct observation process?
Well, we found typical examples of waste like that across the entire process, whether it was erecting the deck, pouring the concrete, installing the rebar, or striking the deck. There were a number of different categories or different types of inefficiencies that we saw at the different stages. And as you break that down and start converting that into money or into potential for savings, we saw quite a considerable amount.
Okay, and I see on the chart here, is there 48% non-productive time?
That's right, yeah. Yeah, 48% is what we found across the entire process.
And how was that taken when you presented that to the team in CISC?
Yeah, and look, to be fair, one of the objectives of the job was to raise awareness around the types of waste, and the team on site were very complimentary about the productivity and the work ethic of the formwork contractor. So that wasn't in question. In fact, they were considered to be exceptional. So even in those circumstances, the idea that we found such an amount of waste was an adjustment for guys. But through the conversations that we had over a period of time, they started thinking differently about it as you explain what we mean. And a lot of different types of ideas and different types of solutions were being proposed and suggested and considered. So I would say over time, as it sank in, construction guys, being problem solvers, were looking for solutions.
Very good. And I think as well, you mentioned there just a moment ago as well about the financial side of it. And I think that's probably always important for us to see, if you're looking at these opportunities, what exactly is the financial implications?
Yeah, for sure. So when we looked across the different, the cost of labour associated with the different aspects or the different stages of the process, we saw quite a considerable potential for saving just within the formwork alone. And our conservative estimate was that if we were to eliminate 50% of that cost, we could save €45,000, which represents a very significant saving on the project. Extrapolating that out to the entire project, it was the potential for €500,000 of savings within the use of this type of, or with the use of this type of tool.
Very good. I think that was what was interesting about this as well, is that view to look outside of the project and actually look forward as well. And I think you have some examples here of just some of the feedback as well from the LCI 2020 book of case studies, from CISC's own feedback as well on this.
Yeah, so CISC put forward a case study in the book of cases for 2020, and they talked about this particular example. And I think one of the main things was the kind of intangible gain in terms of people looking at things differently and seeing a number of kind of immediate opportunities for improvement, which was, again, one of the goals of the project from the start.
Christy, listen, thanks very much for that. I think it's been very informative as to how the process and the tool can be used, the opportunities that's there, even with a crew that's considered exceptional. There's still great opportunities for improvement. So thanks for that. So just before we close out, if you're interested in connecting with Christy or myself, our contact details are here. We're exhibiting today as well as virtually, so feel free to connect with us either today or even afterwards. So thanks very much again, Christy, and thanks for your time for listening. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.